As most of you know, today is my last Sunday at Bethesda. And so I asked to preach today. I've loved my time here, and I will miss you all and miss this place very much. And I wanted one last opportunity to proclaim a message of hope and comfort from this pulpit. I asked to preach today, but I really should have looked at the lectionary readings first. So let's get it out of the way, the elephant in the room, or more precisely, the camel in the gospel. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. By any measure, this is a wealthy community. We're surrounded by yachts and clubs, and even those of us who aren't wealthy, as Palm Beach might define that term, are doing pretty well compared to the rest of the world. Most of us have a roof over our heads, clean water, electricity, a reasonably secure food supply, at least some degree of health care. Most of us are rich. Some of us are very rich. But it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. It's a tough passage to preach on. The dean of my seminary posted on Twitter yesterday that he expected a lot of sermons today telling listeners how to be better camels. Maybe how to just fit through that needle. Someone else quipped that there wasn't really any need for that, because if you're wealthy enough, you can have a needle made that a camel will fit through with room to spare. For centuries, Christians have tried to wiggle out of Jesus' message, out of his language. Some said maybe the eye of the needle was the nickname of a gate in Jerusalem that was really narrow, that a camel could just barely squeeze through. Or maybe the writer got the word wrong in translating from Aramaic to Greek, and Jesus was really talking about a rope going through a needle, which with some patience and some unraveling, you might be able to manage. We can take that route. We can follow their lead. We can close our ears every time Jesus talks about wealth and possessions and money. But I worry that we shortchange the gospel when we refuse to hear the bits that we don't want to hear. In my own experience, it's the bits I don't want to hear that I most need to hear. What might we learn if we face Jesus' words head on? It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. And then there's Jesus' instruction to the rich man to sell his possessions and give the money to the poor. A few Christians in history have taken Jesus at his word on this. St. Francis, who we remembered last week, rather spectacularly gave up all of his wealth, much to his family's dismay. Stories say that he stripped off his elegant clothes and ran naked through the streets. I guess that's one way to make the point that you're giving up all your possessions, but I'm not sure I recommend it. Some monks and nuns take a vow of poverty, but most Christians don't. I'm currently packing for a cross-country move, and that's a process that has forced me to confront just how many possessions I have. For the record, I own 5 coffee makers: drip, espresso, cold brew, and 2 types of French press. I drink tea. There's no question that Jesus' words are challenging, and they're meant to be. One lesson I take from today's gospel and other biblical teaching about money is that money is important, and it can be a barrier in our relationship to God. Money isn't evil. It can be a gift, a source of great good. We can understand it as a responsibility held in trust for others. It can provide security, and that's not a bad thing at all. But money can also be a problem. It can allow us to pretend that the poor of the world don't exist. It can allow us not to see. And it can tempt us to rely on our own resources at times when we ought to trust in God. Ask yourself this about wealth and possessions, or about anything that you hold on to tightly. If you can't do without it, if you, like the man in today's gospel, would go away grieving if you were asked to give it up, if you can't do without it, is it serving you or are you serving it? Whatever degree of wealth we each have, we can all benefit from asking ourselves how our money and our fear of losing it shape our behavior. We can all do better. We can all hold our possessions more lightly. We can all give more and worry less. I guess this is the how to be a better camel part of the sermon. But there's another insight to be found in today's gospel. Notice something. Before Jesus asked the rich man to give up his wealth, he looked at him and he loved him. The man didn't have to do anything to earn that love. Jesus looked at him and he loved him. He looks at you and he loves you. Take Jesus' words as the challenge that they are. Think and pray about how they might apply to you. But know that God's love for you comes first, and that with God, every step matters, and with God, all things are possible. I'll probably keep at least 2 of my coffee makers, but I'll also try to hold them lightly, to be willing to give up what I have if there's a need, to use my resources to help others, and above all, to remember that God's love comes first. Whatever we do with our money should flow from that knowledge, from that certainty of the love of God. It's not necessarily a bad thing to try to be a better camel. If you, like me, decide that that's the best that you can do right now, if what you want to do is try, do so knowing that you cannot and need not earn God's love. Looking at the rich man, Jesus loved him. That's a pretty good place to start for all of us.